And I said, and if you kill yourself, if you succeed in taking your life, I said, you will solve all your problems and you will blow a hole in our lives so big we will spend the rest of our lives trying to fill it and we will never succeed.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview thoughtful, inspiring, and influential guests who are making their mark on the world and contributing to the common good. Making your mark, big or small, is creating a legacy, and it's one of the proven ways we can age with vibrance and deep contentment. Zestful Aging is my legacy. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, psychotherapist and fellow Zestful Ager. Our lovely music is courtesy of Judy Banker, who was a previous guest on Zestful Aging. Find out more about her on judybanker.com. And to find out more about this podcast, my web courses, and other offerings, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. I know that everyone is feeling really stressed and anxious right now. We're all unsettled and feel out of control. So I created a free download for you for maintaining mental health based on my 30 years as a psychotherapist. Just go to zestfulaging.com and it is all yours. Well, as always, I've got my little loyal Jack Russell Sparky right by my side. He's pretty tired. We just had a great hike. And we have a great interview for you today. If you would have told me that I would be interviewing our next guest, a woman I knew casually in the 80s, I would have thought you were crazy. But her recent article in the New York Times allowed us to reconnect, and it's been a lovely opportunity to get to know her all over again. Debby Waldman is a writer, editor, author, and an expat American who's lived in Edmonton, Alberta since 1992. We were knitting buddies in New Haven, Connecticut in the mid-1980s when she was a newspaper reporter there, but we lost touch until recently when a mutual friend sent me her New York Times essay, How COVID-19 and Power Tools Helped Heal My Relationship with My Son. The essay is in part about how the pandemic gave her a chance to pursue a long-time dream, to learn woodworking, but it's also about another step in her journey to understand and to come to grips with her family's legacy of mental illness. And she's recently completed a draft of a memoir about the effects of the secrets and silence that surrounded the suicide of her father, a Reform rabbi, when Debby was 13. Now, although the stigma has about mental health is still being addressed, it's obviously still a sensitive subject, so trigger warning. Welcome to the show, Debby.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It's great to be here with you.
This is so interesting and lovely and slightly, I don't know, would you say just so kind of bizarre?
Yeah, it's really weird. Like
surreal.
We had lost touch, but your name was so familiar to me when you reached out about the essay, and I was like, oh my God, it's been really fun going down memory lane with
It's such a blast from the past. And the thing that I didn't mention in the intro was that the friend, Rebecca, I didn't even know you were friends with her.
I know. Well,
so that's like the double strange, super duper coincidence.
Yeah, because neither of us knew her at the time, right? Like she hadn't come into either of our lives at that point.
Right. Oh my goodness. But we did have a common friend, Marta.
Yeah.
But Marta I did not hear from her about the article. So I'm imagining that it's been pretty wonderful to have this piece of writing in the New York Times, certainly a goal for, I think, every writer. Tell me about your decision to write so openly about your son's severe depression and suicidality.
So I'll tell you, first I'm just going to say one thing. He was dealing with severe depression and suicidality. We don't think about it that way anymore. Like as far as I can see, he's not dealing with it anymore. He's so much I worry about it, I think, because I'm going to worry about it for the rest of my life, but he just seems so much better, and he is better. I mean, he's coping so much better. You wouldn't know that he had gone through that, and he doesn't deny it, and he doesn't poo-poo it, but I think I focus on it in some ways more than he does. I think part of it is because he's 23. It happened when he was 20, and I'm not sure. I'm sure he hasn't processed it entirely. I mean, I realize I'm processing things that happened to me when I was 13 still, and I think we process things for the rest of our lives. So I think, so I wanted to sort of clarify that.
Thank you.
I would not have written about it if he was still in the midst of it. There's just no way. And that doesn't mean that I'm denying it and that I'm saying it could never happen again, because I'm very well aware that it can happen in the blink of an eye. I don't discount that possibility, but right now I try really hard not to worry all the time. And I'm certainly not worrying the way I was when it happened. And I know that not just mentally, but physically, because physically when he was going through this, my stomach was in turmoil for months. I was sick every day for probably 6 or 7 months. And when my stomach started getting better, I realized, okay, your stomach knows that things are better, so maybe your mind can follow.
Oh, wow. I love that about the body giving such clear signals if we're only, paying attention.
I was very, very attuned to that. And I realized you don't have to be carrying this around. You don't have to be anxious about this all the time, because your body will know. And my body still does know. Like if something happens and I know exactly what my physical reactions are. So I know that I'm upset about something. So I'm grateful to that. My mother was the same way. So she used to say, "Don't bother me. You're upsetting my stomach." So, although
yeah, well, that's connected, and we know that's where a lot of the mood and the emotional reaction gets cooked up.
A friend of mine said to me, she said, I think our brain is in our stomach.
So,
yeah.
Well, you may have heard it's called the second brain.
That might have been,
yeah.
Perhaps that was the expression she used. So anyway, but you asked, what made me decide to write about it so openly. So what happened was I was writing an email to my dad's cousin, telling her about how I started doing woodworking and it was really exciting. And I thought, gee, maybe I could write an essay about how this all came about. And so I took the email and put it into a Word file and started working on this essay. And at some point I said to Noah, do you mind if I'm writing this essay? Do you mind about, you're writing working on the canoe and all that? And I said, do you mind if, talk, I think I must have said, do you mind if I mention you're being in the hospital? And he said no. And so then when I got ready to send it out, I said, have you looked at it yet? And he said, no, it's just about the canoe, right? And I said, no, it's about the canoe, but it's also about, you're being in the hospital. And I said, I think I want you to look at it before I send it out. Mm-hmm. And so he looked at it and he said, yeah, sure, you can send it out. And and what was really interesting about that was when he first went into the hospital, he was very adamant that we not tell anybody. And it was a kind of a weird situation for me, because the way it all happened, it happened in January of 2018. It sort of started. He was in his third or fourth. He was in his fourth year of engineering, but he was in a co-op program. So technically he was in his third year of classes. He had just come off 8 months of co-op programs that he really enjoyed. The second one was 4 months doing field work, and he really likes being outside. And then when the field work ended, he and his sister went to South America for 3 weeks, and they had a really great time. And it was like springtime in South America, and or fall, I guess, fall to spring in South America. And then he comes back, and school starts in January, and it's very, very dark here because we're pretty far north. And he wasn't even sure he wanted to be in engineering, and he wasn't sure he wanted to do another co-op, and he was having to choose another co-op right away. And he came to me and he said, I think I need to see a psychiatrist. And I said, are you depressed? And he said, yes. He said yes. And I said, are you feeling suicidal? And he kind of shrugged. And at the time, my experience with suicide was that if somebody intimates that they're suicidal, you should not talk about it because it might encourage them. I've since learned it's the absolute opposite. If somebody's suicidal, you get them to talk about it and explore it, and that's the way that you can actually try to get them to reconsider. But I didn't know that. So I had some friends who were child psychiatrists, and I called them and asked them for some advice, and I passed the advice along to him, which was that he should go to the University Health Center. He was going to university in our town, so he was living at home. And I kept, every so often I would follow up and say, have you talked to somebody at the health center? But at the same time, my aunt was dying. My last surviving aunt was dying, and who I was pretty close to, and my mother was in the late stages of Parkinson's, and then she fell, and so she was dying too. She broke her hip. So all these things were sort of happening at the same time. So I wasn't following up as closely as I probably should have.
And he's a young adult.
Right.
And so I think there's always the question, do I let you take responsibility or am I hovering? There's always that tension.
Yep. So long story short, he eventually did go to the health center, and they were absolutely not helpful at all. And we found out much later that if you want the health center to be helpful, you actually have to tell them that you're suicidal, and then they'll get you in to see a psychiatrist right away. But if you're like him and you maybe weren't entirely sure how you felt or who you should talk to, I guess he told them he didn't really think he was feeling that way, and consequently they made him an appointment with a psychologist. And I don't even know if he ever went, but he did go and talk to his own family doctor. I said, go make an appointment with your family doctor too, because it's easier to get to see a psychiatrist at the university, but if that doesn't work. Anyway, his family doctor gave him antidepressants, and then my mother died. Well, first my aunt died, and then 10 days later my mother died. And we flew from Edmonton to central New York in late February, early March of 2018, when they had the absolute worst ice storm ever in like 100 years. So that was the conditions under which my mother's funeral took place, and it was very traumatic getting there.
And how are you getting through this? Worried about your boy.
I'm on fumes.
You're on fumes. So what does that look like as a mom whose dad committed suicide? So this is something that is real. It can happen. And I'm just wondering how you're getting out of bed and putting one foot in front of the other.
Well, at this point, right, when Mom died, I didn't know how bad it was for Noah. I really didn't. I didn't. And part of it, I think, was that, well, actually, I lie. I did know because between we actually went to see my mother on her birthday, which was February 18th. So it was like 3 weeks after she fell. We went to see her, and when we came back, he and I had this talk. If I'd known better, I would have brought him to the hospital right away. Because he said, what's the point of living? That's what he said. And I didn't know that meant I want to die. Or maybe I didn't want to know that it meant I want to die. And so, wow, I hadn't thought about that. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, so, and it was, he asked me that, I think, like, it turned out it was the day before my mom died. Or was it a day or 2 days before my mother? No, it was the night before my mother died. We had that conversation. And then she died, and everything just sort of, I think that's probably why I forgot about it, is because everything just kind of went crazy, because we had to figure out how we were going to have the funeral, because my mother had to be flown from Milwaukee, where she was living near my sister. She had to be flown to Utica, and she donated her brain to a research program at UMass or Harvard Medical School, so her brain had to be dealt with before she could get on the plane. I mean, it was
all these logistics.
All these logistics that got in the way of thinking about anything else. And so we got back home. My husband and Noah flew back home on the day after the funeral, which was a Saturday. My daughter and I stuck around New York for a few days, and we didn't go back until Wednesday night. And on Saturday, my niece, my sister's middle daughter, who lives in Alberta, the same province that I do, she lives in Calgary, which is about 3 hours away. She drove up for my mother's memorial service. We were having a memorial service for my mom here in Edmonton because so many people had met my mom, and we were having it at the synagogue, and it was on a Sunday. It was going to be Sunday afternoon. So Saturday night, my niece comes into the living room and she said to me, hey, can I have the keys to the van? Noah and I want to go for a ride. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, oh, they must want to go to a coffee shop or something, right? So we gave her the keys, and then my husband and I went to bed. We didn't think anything of the fact that they hadn't come back. I thought it was a little weird, but I was like, I guess they're just having a nice talk. She came into a room the next morning, Sunday at like 8 o'clock, and she said, I just want you to know that I brought Noah to the hospital last night. I determined that he was a danger to himself. His friend is with him. I could only stay there till 3 a.m. because I had to come home and go to sleep because she was pregnant. So she was tired, and she said, so his friend John is there with him, and he's waiting for a psych consult. And I hope you're not mad at me. We're like, I was like, no, why would we be mad at you? But, oh my God, like, now what do we do, right? And we were having this memorial service that afternoon, and there were like 100 people were coming to this memorial service. And so Dave, my husband, went to the hospital, and he stayed with Noah, waiting for the psych consult. And my daughter and I and my niece were at the memorial service, and I was up there with our rabbi, and I had told her what was going on, but we hadn't told anybody else. And I could barely get through anything. And I was just breaking down, and everybody thought I was crying because I missed my mother. But I wasn't even thinking about my mother, right? I was just thinking, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I really can't. And I kept thinking, well, they'll just send him home. I was in such denial, right? And we told a few people after the service. So we told his grandparents, my husband's parents. We told one of his best friends who was there, who actually turned out to be, along with the friend who had sat with him at the hospital, the most wonderful friends you could ever imagine, both to him and to us, because during the time that he was in the hospital, they were in touch with him constantly, and he would tell them things he wouldn't tell us. And so they would say to us, he wants to get out of the hospital, but you can't let him get out of the hospital.
Aha. He was like a link.
Yeah. They were amazing because they were his friends, and they were really worried about him. And anyway, so yeah, we didn't tell too many people, but we had to tell some people because people were coming up to us and saying, "Where's Noah? Where's Dave? Why aren't they here?"
Oh my goodness!
Because we were in this really public situation, right? And why wouldn't they be there? And so Elizabeth, my daughter, God bless her, she was I guess she would have been 22 at the time. She said she made a little white lie. She said they have the man flu, because we kind of didn't really know what was going on at the time, right? But also, yeah, there's that stigma. But for me, it was really, I didn't want to tell people where he was, because it was still so new and horrible, and I didn't really know what was going to happen. I hadn't got my own head around it. But at the same time, I didn't want to lie to people, because I was lied to by my mother for so long, and by my community, right? So there was that whole thing.
So you're dealing with the current reality at that time of Noah needing to be in the hospital for his own safety, but also the past reality of knowing that this could end very badly.
Yeah, it was absolutely. And I remember that Sunday, late in the afternoon, they determined that there was a bed for him in the young adult unit at the psychiatric hospital in our city, and they brought him there in an ambulance. My husband and I went up and met him there. We brought a bunch of his belongings, because we didn't know how long he was going to be there, but I kept thinking, oh, well, the two of us, we were in such denial, like, oh, we'll only be there for a couple of days. He was there for 3 months. He was in the hospital for 3 months. They do not keep you in the hospital for 3 months if it's just a little,
That's right.
Nothing.
That's
so,
right.
Anyway, one of the nurses was showing us around the unit that night, my husband and I, and it hit me. I thought, I could be that person who loses 2 of the most important men in her life to suicide. And I thought, I am not going to be that person. There is no way on God's green earth that I am going to be that person. And I had no idea how I was not going to be that person. But I just thought,
Your resolve.
I could not live with, that's not tenable. That's completely unacceptable. But I also was very well aware that there's nothing you can do if somebody's made their mind up, right?
Yes.
So anyway, that is my very long way of answering your question of what was I thinking when I sat down to write that essay. I was thinking about how when Noah went into the hospital, and even before that, because our relationship had changed a lot, when he was a little, well, you don't know this, but when he was a little kid, he was just like the most outgoing, chatty, friendly, happy kid. And then the fall before he turned 12, he had this massive growth spurt, and his voice changed. Like before he turned 12, his voice changed, which has to be kind of weird. And then his personality changed, and he kind of went from being this really happy, chatty, outgoing kid to like really sullen. And
so that's middle school.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much, has a special place in hell for most of us.
And I didn't know, because I mean, I grew up with a sister. I didn't really, that was the age when my dad died, so I wasn't paying attention to what other boys were how other boys were behaving, right?
Right.
And so this, and I remember talking to my friends when Noah went through that and saying like, oh, when am I going to get my boy back? When am I going to get my boy back? And they're like, oh, it's just a phase. He'll grow out of it. But, and by the time I would say he finished high school, he was, which was what, 5 years later, he was a little bit more interactive, but still, he never turned back into that happy-go-lucky, chatty person. And I never felt that connection with him. I didn't feel that connection that I'd had before. And I just thought, and then after this whole horrible experience with him being in the hospital, I realized, okay, you might never get that connection with him again. You should just be grateful that he's alive and happy and values life and has found something that he wants to do and has friends. And I mean, he always had friends, but like, I just thought, just be grateful for what you have and stop expecting things to go back to the way they are.
Don't ask for too much. Was he different with your husband? Was it a turning away from mom, or was it just a turning away?
I think it was more of a turning away from both of us. He was always had a really good relationship with his sister, but even she noticed a difference, right? Like, especially when he was, in junior high and high school. But after, I guess we bonded over things like we would play Scrabble together and we'd play board games, and that was fun. But it was never like such a natural. There wasn't that real connection, like a shared passion, right? Whereas I think when he was little, the shared passion was conversation, because I like to talk and my husband's not that talkative. My daughter isn't quite as talkative, and whatever. It just, I missed his little chattiness, right? My daughter also, I should say, she's hard of hearing, so that was part of the reason she wasn't as talk. I mean, she does really great with hearing aids, but she's always been sort of more reserved, and Noah's always been more of an extrovert. Then, when the pandemic hit, he was in his last semester of engineering, because he'd gone back into engineering, and he had a job lined up for when he graduated, and it was supposed to start in the beginning of May. And so he was going to have 2 weeks between the ends of classes and when he started his new job, and he was going to move to Calgary, and he was going to live in his uncle's house down there, and he bought a car, and everything was... And then the pandemic hits, and in the middle of April, his future employers call and they say, okay, the job's not starting until the beginning of June. And he said, ugh, now I have 6 weeks with nothing to do. And he's not somebody who doesn't like to have anything to do. And so I was a little worried. I was like, uh-oh, if he doesn't have anything to do, the depression might creep back in, right?
I see.
So I said, well, why don't you build that canoe you've been thinking about? Because one of the things that he did when he was in the hospital, I guess, was he made a whole list of things that he wanted to do with his life. And one of them was to build a canoe. And we bought him this book, or maybe he bought the book about like canoe building. And so the first summer he got out of the hospital, obviously there was not going to be a canoe built. That was all about like just getting your feet back on the ground.
Basics.
And the second summer, he had a girlfriend, and they went on this big 3-month trip. So when he came back, he started a summer job, and so there was no time to build a canoe. And so I said, well, you got 6 weeks. Why don't you build that canoe? And he said, well, I'd need tools, and I don't have any. And I said, well, we haven't bought you a graduation present yet. So he said, what do you need for tools? And so he made a list of what he needed, and his friends had some tools. And then he made a list of the supplies he needed, and he went off and he bought all the supplies. And then his friends came over, and they made all these work tables, and they started building this canoe in the garage, and it was really kind of cool. And because this was like the middle of April.
And you are a hardcore crafter, Debbie, so I can imagine you were looking on with...
Oh, I was so excited. I was like, wow. Like when I was a kid, when I was in junior high school, I wanted to take industrial arts or shop class in the worst way, but girls weren't allowed. This was like the mid 1970s, and girls were, so we had to take home economics. And then I think I think even in high school, I can't remember if I even tried. I just thought, okay, forget it. It's hopeless. I'm never going to get to learn how to do anything with, so I can, I know how to put a hammer to a nail, right? But here was this amazing thing happening in my garage. And so I would go out all the time, and if there was something I could do to help, I would help. And that included
You were craft stalking.
I was exactly, and I would make them food and everything. And one day I went out there, and they were starting. They'd made the paddles, which didn't look anything like what they look like now, but they were pieces of wood glued together. That was the term I used. I now know the proper term is laminating. They laminated different kinds of wood together, and they were beautiful, and they looked like this cutting board that my cousin had made for a wedding present for me and my husband. And he's a shop teacher in Houston, outside Houston, and he made cutting boards for, I guess, all of his cousins. And it was the most beautiful cutting board. And ever since that cutting board, whenever I've seen laminated wood, like I sort of gravitate toward it. And I've always wanted to be able to make something like that. And I said to Noah, hey, do you think you could help me make a cutting board like the paddle? And he said, sure. So he helped me figure out what kind of wood, and we cut the wood, and then I glued the wood, and I was all excited. And then I was like, oh, it didn't stick together very well. There's like little gaps in here. And so I called my cousin. I said, what do I do? And he said, you're probably going to have to take it apart and plane it. And Noah had this hand planer, it's this thing with a sharp edge. And
it's kind of like a mandolin for the kitchen.
But it's for wood. And
yes.
He and his friends, they planed 4 paddles by hand. And of course, they're like young guys in their early 20s. They're really strong. So,
right.
It looks just basically like they're shaving paper. Right. But when I started doing it, I was like,
it's hard. This is not plywood.
This is not easy. Right. I was like, I thought, this could take 5 years. And this is not what I want to spend 5 years doing. And so I said to my cousin, like, is there some other way to do this? And he said, well, you could get like an electric planer. Or a power planer. Right. So we started looking at power tools, and I was like, this is stupid. I'm not going to spend all that money to fix one thing. So one night, these friends of mine came over, and we were showing them the canoe, and I was showing them the cutting boards, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, it had gotten to the point, I should say, before these friends came over, it had gotten to the point where I'd be walking down our alley, because in our neighborhood, everybody's garages are behind the house, so you have an alley with garages on either side, and I'd be walking down the alley, and I'd see people with their power tools out in their driveway, and I'd be like, is that a planer? And they'd be like, no, it's a saw, which goes to show you how little I understood about tools 6 months ago. But anyway, so I tried asking the neighbors. So then these other friends came over, as I said, and they looked at the canoe, and they looked at the cutting boards, and I was whining to Peter, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And Peter said, oh, I have all these power tools. I have a planer and I have a jointer in my shop, and I never use them. You can come over and use them whenever you want. Oh. And then he gave us the key. He makes heating equipment for the oil fields, and he bought a foundry a couple years ago, and the foundry came with all these tools, and he doesn't use the tools, but he has them in his shop. And so he gave us the key to the shop, and I went over there, and the power planer, I mean, you basically...
It's like Narnia.
Yeah, you put the piece of, you put the cutting board in, you sort of adjust the height for the blade, and then it makes a really loud noise, and it spits it out the other end, and it's all cleaned up. And I was like, wow, this is great. So we started, and plus he had this really flat table, so we could glue things on the table. So we started going there like all the time, and we were just having like the best time. And I was making all these cutting boards. And
what did Noah say when you said, "Guess what? I've got the key"?
Oh, he was psyched.
To a magical place.
He was psyched. You know what he's like? You would not believe what's going on in our lives right now. Okay, so we've made a ton of cutting boards. He has made in the last couple of weeks. He's made a really cool night table, and he's putting drawers in it. He's making 2 drawer units for his desk. He made a desk, and he and one of his friends are making a really cool table that it's a live edge table, and it's called a river table. So where what would be the water is actually epoxy, so it looks like there's like river running down the middle of the table. He made a blanket ladder to hang his blankets on.
Oh my goodness!
And we're gonna make menorahs. We started making menorahs like out of wood. We just had to figure out how we laminate them so that and coat them so that the wood won't burn.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to tell you about a product I've been using lately for aches and pains that's really helped me, and I've been singing it from the rooftops. Some of you may already have discovered the benefits of using CBD. I have found it to be a game changer for my creaky joints. I'm a tennis player and I have 3 dogs, and being active is really important to me, and we know how important it is in aging well. But at age 59, my joints can be a bit stiff, especially in my knees. And this stuff has really helped, so I don't have to wear a knee brace anymore, which really wasn't such a good look. I've done my research, and it's very important to get the highest quality ingredients. There's a lot of junk on the market, so you have to make sure the product is tested by a third-party lab at the very least. My favorite company is called Prose, Proze, and they have several products that are formulated for specific problems, including sleep and mental focus. Lately, I've been using the performance gum called Yippies and the Nods, which helps me sleep and tastes very cinnamony. If you go to their website, prose.com, and enter the coupon code ZESTFUL, you're going to get 15% off. I highly recommend trying it out. I think you're really going to be surprised how effective it is, and I would love some feedback from you on how it works. Again, the website Prose, Proze.com. Coupon code is ZESTFUL. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Yeah.
So how much of the crafting is responsible for keeping Noah stable?
Well, I think Noah was really stable before this. I dare say, if I may go out on a limb, I think he's been doing really well. And I think a big part of that, I think part of it's the medication. And I think another really big part of it is that we really impressed upon him that he did not have to be perfect, because that's where this was all coming from. He's always been somebody, we didn't quite realize how hard he was driving himself because he makes it all look easy. But his first 3 years of engineering, his lowest grade was an A-, and I think he only had it once. But he never looked like he was working that hard, but he was working because he always had time to do stuff go out with his friends and have a part-time job. But he put a whole lot of pressure on himself to be perfect, and we didn't realize that, and we didn't realize how we were contributing to that. And
contributing meaning what? Like recognizing that he was a bright kid?
Yeah, like praising him and saying, "Oh, we're so proud of you. You're doing so well." And I think in his head, he heard that as, "I got to keep doing well. I got to keep doing well. If I don't keep doing well, I won't be good and I won't be perfect, and they won't praise me anymore."
But the truth is, now Mom has a big piece in the New York Times, and Dad's a
professor with like one of the most highly cited professors in the world, actually, like the 167th most cited scientist.
So
whatever.
How do you say, "Don't worry, we are so accomplished," but you can just be whoever you are? I mean, how does that how does that ring true to a child?
You remind them, and you tell them often of your failures. You remind them that this did not happen overnight, and that you have failures all the time, and they see your failures, right? Like, and I think I didn't realize how he was hearing things. I guess because I've never thought of myself as like that accomplished. I've always thought, like, I wish I could do better. I wish I was better at this. I wish I was, thinner. I wish I could be better at math and science. So I've certainly never thought of myself as that, outstanding. And I just think of myself as somebody who's worked really, really hard. And yeah, I mean, I'm smart, but I think in many ways Noah's smarter than I am. I mean, he's a pretty exceptional human being, but what we had to impress upon him over and over again was, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be alive. The most important thing is that you're alive, and it's okay to make mistakes, because everyone makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. The the most important thing is that you try hard. And I've said this to him so many times, and to his sister too. You guys work really hard. Everybody knows that you put in the effort. You're the kind of people that people want to hire because you take pride in your work. But it's okay if you make a mistake. And I have to say, when he started working, because eventually that job that he secured back in February that was put off till the beginning of June was canceled altogether. It was field work for an big engineering firm that does a lot of construction, and the pandemic killed all their work. So, or that he was supposed to be working on. Within 2 weeks, he had been offered a part-time job with a professor who he had worked with earlier, and then a full-time job with it was a better job. It was with an engineering project management firm. And it was great. It was a better job than the one he'd initially been offered, because it was a salaried job with benefits and, the opportunity to move up and doing the kind of work that he liked. But he was working from home. And the first few weeks, he kept coming downstairs to me and saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm really bad at this. I like this. And I said, no, it's your first week at work. They don't expect you to know everything, right? And I had to keep reminding him of that. And he doesn't come downstairs and say that very much anymore. He could come downstairs and say, it's kind of a slow day, but...
And some of it, it's hard to know what is the result of growing up in a family whose parents are highly educated, highly successful people, but also some of the depression may have had obsessive compulsive features, right?
And
so,
yes. Yeah. And you know what? I gotta say, I've written this other essay that I'm still trying to find a home for. And it's really about how my experience working with somebody who had done a lot of research into the area of hope. In the process of writing that essay, I looked for the first time at the connection between my dad and Noah and me, and sort of the through line between the three of us. And that through line is this form of we get obsessed with things, and we have to fix things right away, and we have to make things perfect right away, and we can't let something go. And I remember, my mom, after my dad died, my mom used to say to me all the time, you're so much like your father. You have your father's sense of humor, and you look like your father. And of course, I ate that up, right? But the other thing that she would say, which I also ate up, because I ate up anything when she compared me to my father, because she just thought my father was the greatest thing since sliced bread, which, he was a wonderful person, but, he had some flaws, and I wish that I had been more aware of that. But she said to me, if I lost a pen, right, I would have to find that pen right away. Life could not go on until I found that pen. Or if my watch died, I would have to get a new battery right away. And
it's like this fine line. And I remember when we knew each other, I was working at Yale. And what they used to say is, when you're doing research or research assistant work, as I was, OCD is a welcome trait. We want detail-oriented workers. We want you to be careful. That's what quality is about, is attention to detail. But boy, that can flip over pretty quickly when it starts bossing you around,
and
right?
That's exactly what the conclusion of the second psychiatrist saw at the hospital, because he had 2 separate stays in the hospital. He was out of the hospital for a few days, and I guess it was April, at the end of April, he was out of the hospital for a few days. But when he went back in, they put him in a different unit, and he had a different psychiatrist. And that's what those psychiatrists concluded. The first psychiatrist concluded he had a major depressive disorder. The second psychiatrist concluded that he had obsessive compulsive tendencies, and she said, those have held him in good stead all along. She said, but they basically tipped over into maladaptive. They're no longer helpful. They've become maladaptive, and we've got to get him back on track so that he can, use that, because that's exactly what you just said. Those obsessive compulsive tendencies are what lead us to perform well, right? But when you get to the point, as you said, where they're ruling you instead of you ruling them, and God, I don't know if you saw this. Can I go off on a tangent? Is that okay? Or
I'm famous for my tangents.
Okay, so
I have to let you go on. You're sure.
Okay, so there was an article in the Washington Post about a week or so ago about this the son of a congressman from Maryland, who was 25 years old and killed himself. And he was apparently like this incredibly wonderful kid. He did all this work for the poor, and his parents, he was the greatest kid ever. And he went to Harvard. He was in his second year of Harvard Law School, but he was suffering from depression. And his parent, he actually left a note, and the note said, I'm so sorry the illness has gotten the better of me.
Oh my God.
And I read the article, and my heart broke, because I thought, this is a kid who thought he had to be perfect. And even in the article, nobody was acknowledging that. Nobody was acknowledging that, because they were so proud of him because he was so perfect. But I think it's so important that we tell our kids, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to do the best that you can. If it's not perfect, and if you make a mistake, you have to forgive yourself, because life goes on, right? But if you end your life, well, you've solved all your problems, and you've created a world of hurt for the people who love you. And
What is that the advice that you would give, Debbie, parents, and particularly moms? This show is, most of our listeners are middle-aged, post-middle-age women, who probably have kids. And I'm just wondering, what are the words that you can offer if they are dealing with their adult children who this sounds familiar?
remind them of what they do that's good. Remind them that they've had successes. Remind them that it's okay to fail. Tell them of stories where you failed and you managed to get yourself back on track again. And tell them how much you love them. Well, I'll just tell you this. I'll tell you this story. So Noah got out of the hospital at the end after 6 weeks, and on a Friday, and he tried to hang himself on Monday, but only after practicing on Sunday, because that's the kind of kid that he was. So he had to go back into the hospital again, but this time there were no beds. So he was in an emergency room for 2 nights waiting for a new bed.
Oh my
And we would
goodness.
go and spend the day with him at the emergency room, because otherwise he was just, and literally, he didn't even have a room in the emergency room. He was in a hallway where they kept all the psychiatric patients so they could keep an eye on them. And he was at the front of the hallway, okay, because he was at the most risk, right? He had the special place in the hallway. So the second day that he was in the hospital, we were sitting outside in a garden. Well, it was grassy. I wouldn't really call it a garden. It was outside the cafeteria. It was early spring, so it was kind of ugly. And we were sitting on this picnic bench. And I realized that I had to go out on a limb. And by this time, I had taken at least one suicide. I think I'd taken a mental health first aid course with my daughter. So I knew it was okay to talk to people about suicide. And I said to him, I have to tell you something. I said, because if I don't say this now, and God forbid you die before I do, I don't want that to happen before I say this. And I said, I love you. And he hated hearing that. And he said, I know, you don't have to say it. And I said, no, I do. I think that's when I said, I do, because if I said, I do have to say that. And I said, and if you kill yourself, if you succeed in taking your life, I said, you will solve all your problems, and you will blow a hole in our lives so big we will spend the rest of our lives trying to fill it, and we will never succeed.
We won't be able to heal from that.
And he put his arm around me and he pulled me close to him, and it was just the most, it was the hardest thing to say, but I had to say it because you know what? I didn't know my dad was planning to kill himself. My mother had a pretty good inkling that he was. One of the things that's haunted me my entire life was I don't remember if I told him I loved him the last time I saw him when he dropped me off at school. And I just thought, if you're going to choose to kill yourself, I want you to know that I love you. And it wouldn't make it any easier, but at least I said that, right? I let him know. And I'd like to, and my daughter, she said to me, because sometimes she gets, everybody gets depressed, right? Everybody has times when they feel really, really bleak. It's different when you can talk yourself out of it than when your brain is so twisted around that you need a lot more help, right? But So when my daughter has gotten really depressed, she said to me, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll never kill myself."
Oh my goodness.
I would never do that to you, she says. So, but then again, you're supposed to never say never. And you know, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I mean, I hope Noah's going to be healthy for the rest of his life. I hope we all will be. But I hope that if something like what happened 3 years ago happens again, he'll know to get help. And and he'll have people around him who will do their best to ensure that he gets help. I mean, the scariest thing about, I think, you asked me what would I say to parents. I think the scariest thing is when you think your kids don't hear you. And I didn't know if Noah was hearing us for the longest time, and you feel so helpless.
Mm-hmm. Talk about the mental health first aid. Can you just
Yeah, we took this. We have this. We have all these different first aid courses offered by. It's called the St. John's Ambulance. I don't know if every city has one or not, but my daughter found out about this course, and it was when Noah was in the hospital the first time, and she said, "I'm signing us up for this course," and it was really interesting. So they talked a lot about, you know, what causes mental health issues, all the different sort of common mental health diagnoses, what you can do if you're in a situation where somebody's having a mental health crisis. And the thing that really stuck with me was that when somebody is feeling suicidal, you're supposed to talk to them about it. And as somebody who grew up thinking that suicide was a radioactive topic, that was mind-blowing to me. I was like, really? You're supposed to talk to people about it? And I should say it was Elizabeth, my daughter, who saw these ligature marks on Noah's neck when he tried to, because he had stopped himself from hanging himself that second. She saw these marks on his neck, and she said, the two of them were together, and she said, "What's that on your neck?" And he said, "It's from shaving." And his grandfather was there, and Elizabeth was like, "Well, I didn't think they were from shaving, but I don't know. I don't shave." And his grandfather was there, my husband's father, and he said, "Oh, come on, Noah, that's not from shaving." And Elizabeth said, "Do you want to tell us what happened?" And he said, "I'll tell you." And so he told her, and she said, "You have to go back to the hospital." And he said, "I don't want to go back to the hospital." And she said, "You have to go back to the hospital." And the thing of it was, if it had been me, I don't think I could have called the hospital. She did. She knew exactly what to do. God bless her. Because I mean, with everything I know, I don't claim to be an expert. I sure as heck hope I'm not coming off as being one, because I'm not. I'm just a mother who had a son who wanted to kill himself, and I'm the daughter of somebody who did kill himself. So that's where I'm coming from, you know, because I don't think really anybody's an expert. I certainly learned that the psychiatrist, it's very much a trial and error kind of thing. And I think we were so blessed that Noah finally got the help he needed.
It took a while. The way you described it, the first time around was not impressive.
No, I don't think the psychiatrist there, I think he was a by the numbers kind of guy. On the other hand, the first time around, Noah was in a unit with people his own age, and he made some really nice friends there, like who he's still friends with, like people who I feel so maternal toward because and close to, because they went through what they went through with my son, and they're really kind, caring people, and I feel this weird sense of responsibility toward them. So anyway,
so it's such an important subject, and I think especially now, because I'm imagining that we're going to face mental health crises like we have never seen before.
Yep. It's going to be overwhelming, and people are going to have to be really understanding. They really, really are. I mean, this is what's happening around the world right now. So there's the pandemic itself, which is pretty terrifying. Like never knowing, am I going to get it? And if I get it, what's going to happen to me? There's you lose somebody to the pandemic and you can't mourn properly because we can't be together. There's all the businesses that are having to shut down. And then once the pandemic is finally over and people are healthy, then we're going to have to deal with the wreckage from it, right?
That's right. And as we're talking right now, they are about to vote on the impeachment of the U.S. president as we're speaking right now.
And I got to say, there's this part of me that wonders what's going to happen with some of those people who supported him and some of those people who destroyed the Capitol building. What's going to happen when they wake up and realize, oh my God, I've been following a con man. Like I gave up everything for a con man. There's going to be some repercussions there too, I would think.
Let's hope that they wake up.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
right now there's some real fears about safety during the inauguration on the 20th of January.
Really, really, it's so frightening. It's frightening to watch from afar. You know, like, that's my country. But
That's right.
I'm grateful I'm here. And I should also say I'm grateful that I live in a country with socialized medicine, because my son eventually did get the help he needed, and we paid for it through our taxes, you know?
It's interesting because when I first found out that Noah was in the hospital for that long, I thought to myself, that is would not happen in the U.S. because the insurance companies would not have allowed that.
Yep. And that's a crying shame, because it can take so long to get things right. And you know, the other thing is, there were kids that we met who had been in the hospital numerous times. Like, I mean, Noah had 2 stays. They were pretty close together. Who knows? Maybe there'll be another one. I don't know. At least I know if he went back again, we would know what to do. Because the second time we were way more proactive than the first time. The first time we were like, we didn't know what we were doing. We just assumed everybody else was the experts. The second time we got way more, and we were also invited to be involved the second time. The first time we weren't. There were some balls dropped the first time around. So that was part of the problem. It was weird.
I was going to say, I'm sure our audience, the dirty little secret is we all have mental illness in our families, and that's just that's the fact of life. And I think it would be helpful for our audience to read more about your experience. Where can they find your New York Times article, and where can they learn more about you?
Oh, okay. So the article was called How COVID-19 and Power Tools Helped Heal My Relationship with My Son. It's on the New York Times website. It appeared in October. It's also on my webpage, which is just www.debbywaldman.com. And Debby is with a Y, D-E-B-B-Y.
Yeah.
And then I have a Twitter account, which is Debby with a Y, JW1122. And it'd be great if people went and looked at that, because I feel like I post some funny things and I want more people to see them.
Not just knitted socks?
No, not just knitted socks. Lately I've been posting my Scrabble tiles. Like last night I was playing Scrabble, and like every tile was like sending a subliminal message about Donald Trump.
I saw that and I thought, it was mild, though. I thought, what was it, like?
Ogre.
Lies.
And lies. Lies with a lot of eyes.
That's right. I thought ogre was a very generous, but, you're not supposed to be using profanity.
Oh, and rig. Like, I thought that was really funny. Rig and exit. It's like, okay, the election was not rigged, and now you are going to exit. I think
you should, instead of doing Scrabble, maybe you should write paragraphs with your.
I was having so much fun, and Noah's like, Mom, if you post that, don't mention my name. I'm not going to, because I'm the one who got all the funny letters. So there you go.
Oh my gosh. So. Debbie, thank you so much for sharing your story and letting us in and helping us understand your experience, because I'm hoping that more and more the stigma is lifted. I think that is going to happen as people are dealing with the pandemic and the politics, and there's going to be no other choice.
To be open about it.
To be open and address it, because, as you probably know with your own research, the suicide rate has gone up something like 200%.
Yeah. Yep. And it's really quite
it's
frightening, and also
it's a crisis.
And there's the overdoses have
Yes.
increased tremendously. Yeah, no,
and
it's really,
drinking and I mean, people are not just knitting socks.
no, or making cutting boards.
Or making cutting boards or binging PBS cooking shows as I am.
Oh, I should try doing that.
So it's a cocoon of comfort and loveliness. And then you can make yourself a little beautiful tea and you're just in your, your little cozy world.
I might have to go make myself some tea now.
Yeah.
So, hey,
please do.
so Nicole, no, thank you so much for having me.
Hey everyone, I wanted to tell you about a powerful new tool that supports your mental and emotional health in what are extremely trying times. And you may remember that I've been a psychotherapist for 30 years, and I'm always a little suspicious of products that claim to help us feel less anxious, depressed, or worried. But then I was introduced to a new kind of app called Cope Notes, and I have become a big fan. Cope Notes was developed by a guy who spent a lot of his life trying to figure out what might help support him through his own weekly psychotherapy sessions. Cope Notes is an app that gives you random texts through the day to break through some of the negative messages that might be repeating in your head. It's well researched and has been adopted by many mental health facilities. I highly recommend it. I think we can all use a little support right now. So check out copenotes.com/zestful. I will receive a small portion of those proceeds. And I'd love to hear your feedback about how it works for you. Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends. I love to hear from my listeners. Send me an email at NicoleChristina.com. It's no secret that everyone's feeling pretty restless and unsettled right now. Our lives are upside down and the future is feeling pretty uncertain. But if you're anything like me, organizing my stuff can help me feel a little calmer. It's something I can do to help me feel a little more in control and in charge of my own life. If you think decluttering could help you feel better and you could use a little assistance with that, check out the online course I've developed with professional organizer and designer Carrie Luderin. It's called Too Much Stuff. And Too Much Stuff is different from other courses or articles or guidance you may have used up. We give you clear steps to deal with the clutter and the tools to help you face the overwhelming feelings and the emotions that come up when we're going through our clutter. And a lot of those emotions are just feeling anxious or guilty or just basically flooded with a lot of different confusing feelings. The course is really practical. It's realistic. The lessons are short and punchy, and they're really manageable. We're not trying to set you up for some long exploratory, super in-depth, burdensome experience. We want something really helpful for you right now. We all need help with our anxiety. So being surrounded by more calm and less chaos can really help. So now's a good time to clear out the clutter so we can focus on what's really important in our lives. So find out more at zestfulaging.com. You'll see more about this under the web courses tab. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email at zestfulaging@gmail.com. Thanks so much. And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest.